Asterisk, your subconscious is pushing love away and you don't even know it. Asterisk. Powerful introduction. What if the very thing you have been praying for, hoping for, and desperately trying to attract has been standing at the door of your life, but something deep within you keeps quietly pushing it away? What if love is not avoiding you because you are unworthy, unlucky, or destined to be alone? What if the real obstacle is hidden beneath your conscious desires, inside the beliefs, fears, memories, and assumptions you have repeated for so long that you no longer even recognize them? You may consciously say, I want love. I want them to choose me. I want a healthy, committed, beautiful relationship. But beneath those words, another voice may be whispering something completely different. Love never lasts. People always leave. I am not enough. I have to struggle to be chosen. If I get too close, I will get hurt. And that hidden voice can quietly influence the way you experience love. Your subconscious does not simply listen to what you say once. It becomes familiar with what you repeatedly accept as true. It absorbs the stories you tell yourself in lonely moments. It remembers the emotional meaning you attach to rejection. It recognizes the expectations you carry into every conversation, every relationship, every silence, and every unanswered message. And when an old belief becomes familiar, you may begin reacting from it automatically. You may overthink when someone becomes distant. You may doubt someone when they show genuine affection. You may chase reassurance, test their feelings, expect disappointment, or pull away before they have the chance to hurt you. Without realizing it, you can find yourself protecting your heart from the very love you have been asking to receive. But here is the powerful truth. You are not trapped by an old inner story. The patterns that once felt automatic do not have to define your future. You can begin to notice what you have been assuming about love, about yourself, and about what you believe is possible for you. You can stop identifying with the version of yourself who always expects rejection. You can stop rehearsing painful endings before a new chapter has even begun. You can begin creating a new inner experience, one in which being loved feels natural, being chosen feels safe, and receiving affection no longer triggers fear. This is where your transformation begins. Not by forcing another person to change, not by endlessly searching for signs, not by chasing, begging, convincing, or trying to control every outcome. It begins when you become aware of what is happening within you. Because the moment you recognize an unconscious pattern, you are no longer completely controlled by it. You can pause, you can choose differently, you can replace the old story with a new one. So as you listen to this message, allow yourself to be completely honest. What do you secretly believe about love? What do you expect when someone gets close to you? Do you believe you must struggle to be chosen? Do you expect people to leave? Do you feel that love is always just beyond your reach? Because perhaps love has never been as far away as you thought. Perhaps the greatest shift begins when you stop unconsciously preparing for rejection and start becoming familiar with a new possibility. I am worthy of love. I am safe to receive love. I do not have to chase what is meant to be experienced with openness, confidence, and peace. Today, you are about to look beneath the surface. You are about to discover the hidden assumptions that may have been shaping your love story. And more importantly, you are about to learn how to begin changing them. Your hidden assumptions are creating your love story. Have you ever stopped to wonder why you can deeply desire love and yet somehow continue experiencing the same painful patterns? You may consciously want someone to choose you, love you, commit to you, and make you feel secure, but your deepest assumptions may be telling a completely different story. This is where many people become confused. They focus only on what they consciously want, while ignoring what they repeatedly believe, expect, and emotionally accept beneath the surface. You may say that you want a beautiful relationship, but if your inner world is constantly repeating, people always leave me, I am never the one they truly choose, love never works out for me, or the moment I become attached, something goes wrong, then these assumptions can quietly influence the way you approach every relationship. Your subconscious becomes familiar with the emotional story you repeat most often. And when a story becomes familiar, you may begin living from it without even realizing it. Think about how often your reactions are automatic. Someone takes longer than usual to reply, and suddenly your mind begins searching for reasons to worry. Someone becomes quiet, and you immediately assume something is wrong. Someone shows genuine affection, yet instead of peacefully receiving it, you question whether it will last. You may start looking for hidden problems, waiting for disappointment, or preparing yourself for abandonment before anything has even happened. The person in front of you may not have rejected you, but an old assumption has already convinced you that rejection is coming. And because you are emotionally responding to what you expect, rather than simply what is happening, you may unknowingly create patterns of anxiety, withdrawal, overthinking, or constant reassurance seeking. This does not mean that you are to blame for everything that has ever happened in your love life. Other people have their own choices, feelings, and responsibilities, but your inner assumptions can shape how you interpret situations, what behavior you tolerate, what you expect, and how you respond when uncertainty appears. If you secretly believe you must chase love, you may struggle to relax when someone gives you space. If you believe you are difficult to love, you may question affection when it is freely offered. If you believe that relationships always end badly, you may find it difficult to fully open your heart, even when a healthy opportunity appears. The powerful shift begins when you become aware of the story you have been repeating. Ask yourself, what do I naturally expect from love? What do I believe people eventually do to me? What words appear in my mind when I feel uncertain? These questions are not meant to make you judge yourself. They are meant to help you see the invisible pattern. Because you cannot consciously change a story you refuse to notice. Awareness is the moment you step back and realize, this is an old assumption. This is not necessarily the truth of my present moment. Then, little by little, begin choosing a different inner story. Instead of automatically saying they will leave, remind yourself, I do not need to predict a painful future. Instead of I am never chosen, begin accepting, I am worthy of mutual, healthy, and secure love. Instead of constantly searching for proof that something is going wrong, practice allowing positive experiences to exist without immediately questioning them. The goal is not to force yourself into unrealistic perfection. It is to become more familiar with a healthier expectation. Your love story can begin to change when you stop allowing old pain to write every new chapter. You are not required to remain loyal to the beliefs that were formed during your most difficult experiences. The past may explain why certain assumptions developed, but it does not have to control what you believe forever. The moment you recognize the hidden story, you gain the opportunity to write a new one. And perhaps the love you desire does not require you to become someone else at all. Perhaps it begins when you finally stop expecting yourself to be abandoned, rejected, or overlooked, and start allowing yourself to believe that being loved can feel safe, natural, and possible. The fear of being hurt can become the fear of being loved. One of the most hidden reasons love can feel difficult to receive is that, deep beneath the conscious desire for connection, there may also be a fear of what connection could bring. You may genuinely want to be loved, chosen, appreciated, and emotionally close to someone, yet another part of you may remember disappointment, rejection, betrayal, abandonment, or the pain of giving your heart and not receiving the same love in return. Because of those experiences, your mind may have learned to associate closeness with danger. You may not consciously say, I'm afraid of love, because you truly believe that love is what you want. But your reactions may reveal something deeper. When someone gets too close, you become suspicious. When they show genuine interest, you begin questioning their intentions. When things start going well, you wait for something to go wrong. And sometimes, without even realizing it, the fear of being hurt can become the very reason you struggle to fully receive the love you desire. The subconscious mind often tries to protect you by repeating what feels familiar. If your past taught you that opening your heart leads to pain, then emotional distance can begin to feel safer than intimacy. You may pull away from someone you genuinely care about because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. You may test them repeatedly because you are searching for proof that they will eventually leave. You may overanalyze every word, every message, and every moment of silence because you are trying to predict pain before it arrives. Or perhaps you become attracted to emotionally unavailable situations because they feel strangely familiar. The heart may want peace, but the subconscious can mistake familiar chaos for something normal. This creates an inner conflict where you desire love and yet unconsciously defend yourself against it at the same time. This is why simply saying, "I want love," is sometimes not enough to change an old emotional pattern. You must also become aware of whether you feel safe receiving what you are asking for. Imagine someone telling you that they care deeply about you. Can you receive those words peacefully, or does your mind immediately ask, "But how long will this last?" Imagine a relationship becoming stable and secure. Does that feel comforting? Or does part of you become restless because you are accustomed to uncertainty? These questions are important because sometimes we do not push love away by physically running from it. Sometimes we push it away through constant doubt, emotional walls, fear-based reactions, or the belief that happiness cannot last. The beautiful truth is that recognizing this pattern is already the beginning of change. You do not have to force yourself to trust everyone, ignore red flags, or pretend that past experiences never happened. Healing does not mean becoming careless with your heart. It means learning that protecting yourself and closing yourself completely are not the same thing. You can have boundaries and still allow connection. You can move slowly and still remain open. You can learn from the past without allowing the past to decide that every new person will create the same pain. Begin noticing the moments when fear tries to take control. When your mind starts predicting abandonment, pause before accepting that thought as truth. When affection makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself whether the present situation is actually unsafe or whether an old experience is being activated. Give yourself permission to create a new relationship with love, where closeness does not automatically mean danger and vulnerability does not automatically mean loss. You are allowed to experience love without constantly preparing for its ending. You are allowed to be cared for without questioning whether you deserve it. The past may have taught you to build walls, but you are not required to live behind them forever. As you gradually release the belief that love must hurt, you can begin making space for a healthier possibility. Love can be peaceful, love can be mutual, and it can be safe to open your heart without abandoning yourself. You may be repeating an old self-concept. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is this: who do I believe I am when it comes to love? Not who do you want to become? Not what kind of relationship do you dream about? But who have you repeatedly identified yourself as being? Because your self-concept can quietly influence the expectations you carry into relationship, the situations you accept, and the way you interpret the actions of others. If, somewhere deep within, you have accepted the identity of someone who is always rejected, overlooked, abandoned, or difficult to love, you may continue viewing new experiences through that old identity. Even when love begins to appear, you may struggle to believe it belongs to you. Even when someone treats you well, you may wait for the moment they change. The old version of you may whisper, "This never lasts for me." And before you know it, you are responding to a story from the past instead of allowing yourself to experience the present. A self-concept is often built through repetition. Perhaps you experienced rejection and began telling yourself that nobody chooses you. Perhaps a relationship ended and you unconsciously turned one painful experience into an identity by deciding that you are always the person who gets left. Maybe you were made to feel that you had to work hard for attention, so now you believe love must always be chased. These conclusions may have developed during emotional moments, and because they were repeated internally, they gradually began to feel natural. But something feeling familiar does not automatically make it true. An old identity can become so deeply practiced that you stop questioning it. You simply assume that this is who you are, and that this is how your love life will always be. This is where the cycle can become difficult to recognize. If you believe you are unworthy of consistent love, you may become uncomfortable when someone is genuinely consistent. If you identify as someone who is always chasing, you may feel anxious when there is nothing to chase. If you see yourself as the person who is always forgotten, every delayed reply may seem like proof of that identity. You may not even be reacting to the other person alone. You may be reacting to what their behavior appears to confirm about the story you already believe about yourself. But you do not have to continue carrying an identity simply because you carried it yesterday. You are allowed to question the version of yourself that was created during moments of pain. You are allowed to recognize that the person who experienced rejection is not required to become a person who expects rejection forever. Your history is part of your story, but it does not have to become your permanent definition. The transformation begins when you consciously decide what kind of relationship you want to have with yourself. Instead of repeating, I am always left, begin introducing a new inner understanding. I am worthy of mutual and consistent love. Instead of saying nobody ever chooses me, remind yourself, I do not have to compete for my value. Instead of assuming that love requires struggle, allow yourself to consider the possibility that healthy love can include peace, respect, and reciprocity. This does not mean you must pretend that you never feel insecure. Changing a self-concept is not about becoming perfect overnight or forcing yourself to believe words that feel impossible. It is about becoming aware of the old identity and gently refusing to let it control every new experience. Each time you notice yourself thinking from the perspective of rejection, pause and ask, is this who I want to continue being, or is this simply an old story trying to survive? Over time, what once felt unfamiliar can begin to feel natural. You can become more comfortable receiving affection without suspicion. You can learn to value yourself without waiting for another person to validate you. You can stop seeing every difficult moment as proof that you are unlovable. The old self may have learned to expect pain, but a new self can learn to expect something different. Your love story may begin changing the moment you stop asking, why does this always happen to me? And begin asking, what version of myself am I ready to become? Because you are not here to spend your life repeating an identity built from your wounds. You are allowed to release the old story, create a healthier self-concept, and become increasingly familiar with a simple but powerful truth. You do not have to earn your worthiness. You are already worthy of love, respect, and a relationship in which you can be fully yourself. Overthinking can keep you focused on what you fear. Overthinking can become one of the quietest ways your subconscious pushes love away, because it often disguises itself as protection. You tell yourself that you are simply being careful, trying to understand the situation, or preparing for what might happen next. But when your mind constantly searches for hidden meanings, worst-case scenarios, and signs of rejection, you may find yourself living in a relationship with fear rather than with the reality of the present moment. A delayed message becomes evidence that something is wrong. A change in someone's tone becomes a reason to panic. A quiet day becomes proof that they are losing interest. Before you know it, your mind has created an entire painful story without having clear evidence that the story is true. The subconscious mind can become so accustomed to expecting disappointment that it automatically searches for information that appears to confirm its fears. This pattern can be exhausting because you may never feel fully safe. Even during beautiful moments, part of your mind may be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Instead of enjoying affection, you wonder whether it will last. Instead of receiving a kind message, you analyze why it was sent. Instead of allowing a relationship to develop naturally, you may constantly ask yourself what every action means and what will happen next. The problem is not that you care deeply. Caring is not the enemy. The difficulty begins when fear convinces you that you must constantly monitor love in order to keep it. You may start checking for reassurance, seeking repeated confirmation, or reacting emotionally to situations before giving yourself time to understand what is actually happening. Sometimes overthinking causes you to respond to imagined rejection as though it were real rejection. You may become distant because you assume someone is about to leave. You may send emotional messages because you are afraid of being forgotten. You may test another person's feelings because you are secretly waiting for them to fail the test. And afterward, you may wonder why relationships feel so stressful. The answer may not always be found in what another person is doing. Sometimes the greatest source of stress is the conversation taking place inside your own mind. The important thing to remember is that a thought is not automatically a fact. Just because your mind says they are losing interest does not mean that they are. Just because you imagine a painful future does not mean you have predicted one. The subconscious often repeats familiar fears because familiar thoughts require less effort than unfamiliar beliefs. If you have spent years expecting disappointment, peace may initially feel strange. If you are accustomed to analyzing every detail, simply allowing a moment to exist without interpreting it can feel uncomfortable. But this is where a powerful transformation can begin. When you notice yourself spiraling into overthinking, pause and return to the present. Ask yourself, what do I actually know right now? Separate facts from fears. Perhaps you do not have enough information yet, and that is okay. You do not need to fill every empty space with a painful assumption. Give reality the opportunity to reveal itself before your imagination decides what it means. You can also begin practicing a calmer inner dialogue. Instead of immediately assuming the worst, remind yourself, I do not need to create a negative story without evidence. I can wait, I can breathe, I can respond rather than react. This does not mean ignoring genuine problems or pretending that unhealthy behavior does not exist. Healthy awareness is different from fear-driven obsession. You can recognize patterns, communicate your needs, and maintain boundaries without allowing every uncertain moment to become an emotional emergency. The more you practice returning to peace, the less power automatic fear may have over your reactions. You begin to understand that love does not need constant surveillance in order to exist. You do not have to chase certainty every minute of the day. You can allow conversations to unfold, give people space to be human, and give yourself space to remain grounded. Perhaps the greatest freedom comes when you stop treating every fearful thought as a warning. Your mind may offer you countless stories, but you get to decide which stories deserve your attention. And as you release the habit of constantly focusing on what you fear, you create more room to experience what is actually happening. Peace becomes possible when you stop rehearsing rejection and start allowing yourself to remain present, secure, and open to the possibility that love does not always have to end the way fear predicts. Love begins to feel different when you change what feels natural. The final and perhaps most powerful shift in your love story begins when you understand that your subconscious often moves toward what feels familiar, even when what feels familiar is not what you truly desire. You may consciously want peace, commitment, affection, and emotional security. Yet if you have spent years experiencing uncertainty, chasing attention, doubting yourself, or preparing for rejection, those patterns can begin to feel normal. Then, when something healthier appears, you may not immediately recognize it as comfortable. Consistency may feel unfamiliar. Peace may feel boring. Someone who communicates clearly may seem less exciting than someone who keeps you guessing. This is not because you truly want chaos. It may simply be because your subconscious has become accustomed to associating emotional intensity with love. And until you begin changing what feels natural within you, you may continue being pulled toward patterns that repeat the old story. Think about this carefully. What feels natural to you when someone genuinely loves you? Do you relax and receive it? Or do you immediately begin wondering what could go wrong? When someone is consistent, do you trust the consistency? Or do you search for the moment it will disappear? When love is peaceful, do you allow yourself to enjoy the peace? Or does part of you feel that something must be missing? These reactions can reveal what your inner world has become accustomed to. Sometimes the subconscious is not pushing love away because you do not want it. It is pushing away an unfamiliar experience because unfamiliarity can feel uncomfortable. Even when that experience is healthy, the good news is that what feels natural can change. You are not permanently attached to the emotional patterns you learned in the past. The mind becomes familiar with repetition, which means you can begin introducing yourself to a new internal experience. You can practice seeing yourself as someone who is comfortable being loved. You can imagine responding to affection with calm instead of suspicion. You can remind yourself that a peaceful relationship does not need constant drama to be meaningful. You can become more familiar with the idea that you do not have to earn every ounce of love through struggle, sacrifice, or anxiety. This transformation does not happen because you force yourself to ignore every negative thought. It happens through gentle repetition and conscious awareness. Each time an old reaction appears, you have an opportunity to choose something different. Perhaps your first instinct is to panic when someone takes time to respond. Instead of allowing that panic to create an entire story, you can pause and return to the belief that your worth is not determined by one message or one moment. Perhaps you feel the urge to chase reassurance. You can remind yourself that security begins within your own relationship with yourself. Perhaps you automatically assume that good moments will end. You can choose to experience the good moment without demanding a guarantee about the future. At first, this new way of thinking may feel unnatural. That is completely normal. The old pattern has simply been practiced longer, but unfamiliar does not mean impossible. Every time you respond with greater calm, self-respect, and emotional awareness, you weaken the automatic power of the old story. Slowly, you begin creating a new emotional home within yourself. Being valued starts to feel believable. Being loved begins to feel safe. Being chosen no longer feels like something you must fight for, and this is where everything begins to change. You stop approaching love as someone desperately trying to prove their worth. You begin approaching it as someone who understands that love should not require you to abandon yourself. You become more willing to recognize reciprocity, respect boundaries, communicate honestly, and release situations that repeatedly make you feel small. The greatest transformation is not simply attracting a different experience. It is becoming a person who no longer believes that pain is the price of love. When peace becomes familiar, chaos loses some of its attraction. When self-worth becomes stronger, chasing becomes less necessary. When you learn to feel safe within yourself, you become more capable of receiving healthy connection without fear. So begin today by asking yourself one powerful question. What would it feel like if being loved was completely natural to me? Sit with that possibility. Allow yourself to become familiar with it, because you do not have to keep repeating the emotional patterns that once protected you but no longer serve you. You can create a new inner expectation, one where love feels peaceful, mutual, respectful, and safe. And as you gradually change what feels natural within you, you may discover that the greatest thing you were ever pushing away was not love itself, but the belief that you were truly allowed to receive it.